Imagine a billionaire father, too busy building skyscrapers to notice his own son's quiet sadness, until one ordinary afternoon in a little cafe, a kind teenage girl changes everything. Stay tuned to see how a simple act of compassion transforms 3 lives forever. Stop right there. The command sliced through the cafe like a clap of thunder. Coffee cups rattled, a spoon clinked to the floor, and every head turned toward the entrance. The late morning buzz of conversation dissolved into an uneasy hush. Billionaire developer Richard Hale, a man whose name was whispered in boardrooms and splashed across financial magazines, stood framed in the glass doorway. His custom-tailored suit caught the sunlight, his steel-gray eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. Normally, Richard's arrival signaled control, power, and precision. But in this moment, something else flickered across his face: surprise. Even the barista behind the counter stopped mid-pour, wondering what could shock a man who had seen everything. Richard wasn't angry. He wasn't even sure why the words had jumped from his throat. What he saw at the far corner table stole his breath. There, beside a half-finished chocolate milkshake, sat his 8-year-old son Ethan, bright hair glowing like spun gold. Ethan's wheelchair was pulled close to the table, his small hands resting in his lap. But the real astonishment wasn't the wheelchair. Richard knew that sight all too well. It was the look on Ethan's face. Pure, unguarded joy. His laughter rose like music, rich and unbroken, echoing off the cafe's tall windows. And next to him, a girl. A cheerful black teenager in a perfectly pressed school uniform leaned in with easy confidence. Her hair was swept back in a tidy bun, and her smile could have lit the cloudy day outside. In her hand, she held a fork with a warm pastry balanced delicately on the tip. She fed it to Ethan as though they'd known each other forever, her voice soft and melodic, coaxing another giggle from him. Richard's mind raced. Who was she? Where was the nanny? And how on earth, had Ethan, who rarely smiled these days, fallen into such unrestrained laughter with a complete stranger? The cafe's warm lights reflected in the girl's eyes as she encouraged Ethan to take another bite. See? I told you it's the best thing on the menu, she said, laughing with him. Her presence radiated calm and kindness, wrapping the moment in a glow Richard hadn't felt in years. He stood frozen, memories pressing hard against his chest. The endless hospital visits. The quiet car rides where Ethan stared out the window, silent. The way Richard's own calendar, jammed with meetings, mergers, and late-night calls, had slowly pushed father-son moments to the edges of life. He had bought toys, hired therapists, and built ramps in their mansion, but none of it had drawn out the kind of laughter ringing through the cafe now. Richard took a hesitant step forward, the polished tips of his shoes clicking on the tiled floor. A couple near the door whispered, recognizing the powerful billionaire whose empire spanned cities. Yet today, Richard didn't care about appearances or headlines. All he saw was the sparkle in Ethan's eyes and the easy kindness of a girl who, somehow, had broken through a wall he hadn't been able to touch. His heart pounded, a strange mix of wonder and guilt. When was the last time he had made Ethan laugh like that? Had he even tried? The girl glanced up and noticed him at last. Instead of looking nervous, she smiled, warmly, fearlessly, as though she'd been expecting him all along. Richard exhaled, a breath he didn't know he was holding. Something extraordinary was happening here, something no amount of money could buy. And deep down, he knew this single moment, this surprising encounter in a small cafe on an ordinary morning, was about to change all of their lives forever. The girl set the fork down gently and straightened her posture as Richard approached. Her calmness surprised him. Most adults stiffen when they realized who he was. Teenagers usually stared or fumbled for a phone to snap a photo. But this young woman simply offered a warm, respectful smile. "Hi," she said, her voice smooth and steady. "I'm Amara." Richard blinked, caught off guard by her composure. "Amara," he repeated, almost to himself. "That's a beautiful name." She nodded politely. "Your son is wonderful. We were just talking and sharing a snack while you were busy." Her words carried no judgment, but Richard felt an unexpected pang of guilt. He had only stepped out to take a business call, yet in those few minutes, someone else had captured Ethan's full attention. Ethan beamed. "Dad, Amara told me the funniest story about her dog chasing a squirrel up a tree. You should have heard it." Amara laughed, her eyes sparkling. "It's true. My dog thinks he's a superhero, but he can barely climb the porch steps." Richard managed a faint smile. "Sounds like quite the adventure." He slid into the empty chair across from them. "How did you two meet?" "I was waiting for my to-go order," Amara explained. "I saw Ethan trying to cut his pastry, but the plate kept sliding. I asked if he'd like some help, and here we are." Her explanation was simple, but her tone carried an ease that felt unusual in Richard's world of calculated networking and guarded conversations. She wasn't performing a favor for recognition, she was just kind. Richard studied her for a moment. She wore a neat navy blazer with a modest school emblem on the pocket. The uniform looked carefully pressed but slightly worn at the edges, as though it had served her through many long days. A small silver cross hung around her neck, catching the cafe slight with every movement. "So, Amara," Richard asked, "do you often help strangers in cafes?" She chuckled softly. "I guess I do. My grandma always says, if you see someone struggling, lend a hand. That's how we keep the world human." She tilted her head, almost teasing. "Besides, Ethan's easy to talk to. He tells great jokes." Ethan giggled and tried to hide his grin behind his napkin. "She's just being nice, Dad." Richard leaned back, intrigued. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She is," Amara agreed. "I live with her. She raised me after my parents passed when I was little." Richard's chest tightened. There was no self-pity in her voice, only quiet strength. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said gently. "Thank you," she replied. "Grandma and I manage. I work part-time at the community center after school. We help kids with disabilities, tutoring, sports, that kind of thing. It's my favorite place." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? What kind of games?" "Oh, all sorts," Amara said. "Wheelchair basketball, adaptive dance, art projects. We focus on what kids can do, not what they can't." Richard felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. Here was a teenager balancing school, work, and volunteer service, and still finding time to brighten a stranger's morning. In the boardrooms of his empire, he rarely met adults with that much heart. He cleared his throat. "That's admirable, Amara." "Truly." She shrugged lightly. "I just think small actions matter. You never know how a simple kindness might change someone's whole day." Those words landed with surprising force. Richard thought of his endless meetings, the towering glass buildings he'd built to the sky. He had measured success in contracts and profits. Yet here sat a young girl reminding him that kindness, a smile, a steady hand, might be more powerful than all his wealth. Ethan nudged his father. "Dad, can we visit that center sometime?" Richard met Amara's calm gaze and found himself saying, "I'd like that." For the first time in years, Richard felt the faint but undeniable shift of something more valuable than money, genuine human connection. Richard signaled the waiter with a subtle nod. "Why don't we all have lunch together?" he suggested. "My treat." Amara hesitated, glancing at Ethan as though to check if this was okay with him. Ethan's eager grin answered for her. "Please stay," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "You have to try their grilled cheese, it's the best." "All right," Amara replied, a gentle smile warming her face. "But only if you promise to tell me more of those space jokes, Ethan." Soon the three of them settled into a cozy corner booth, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Outside, autumn leaves swirled along the sidewalk, but inside the cafe there was a comforting hum of chatter and the rich aroma of coffee and warm bread. For the first time in years, Richard wasn't thinking about his next meeting or his overflowing inbox. He was fully present. The waiter brought menus, but Ethan already knew what he wanted. "Mac and cheese, please," he said confidently. I'll have the garden salad, Amara decided. Richard ordered a roasted chicken sandwich, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. So, Amara, tell me more about yourself. You mentioned working at a community center? Amara nodded. Yes. After school and on weekends. We host programs for kids with disabilities, arts and crafts, music, adaptive sports. My grandma started volunteering there years ago, and I grew up tagging along. Now it's my turn to help. Richard raised an eyebrow, impressed. That's a lot of responsibility for someone your age. It doesn't feel like work, she said. It's fun. And it matters. The kids there are amazing. They teach me things every day. What kind of things? Ethan asked, curiosity bright in his eyes. Amara smiled thoughtfully. Patience. Creativity. How to celebrate every little victory. Some of the kids have tough challenges, but they're full of determination. They remind me that life isn't about what you can't do, it's about what you can do. Richard felt those words settle in his chest. He'd spent years chasing success, measuring each day by profits and productivity. But this teenager spoke as though success was something quieter and deeper. As they waited for their meals, the conversation flowed easily. Amara shared stories of art projects where children with limited mobility created beautiful murals using adapted brushes. She described wheelchair basketball games that turned into joyful chaos and music sessions where every sound was a celebration. Ethan listened with wide-eyed wonder. I wish I could try all that, he said. You can, Amara replied warmly. You'd be great. We have a game night coming up next Friday. You should both come. Richard caught the invitation in her words, soft but sincere. He imagined leaving his office early, something he rarely did, to spend an evening at a community center. The idea felt foreign, and surprisingly appealing. Their meals arrived, and the table filled with the scent of warm cheese and roasted herbs. Ethan dug into his macaroni with gusto, while Amara carefully divided her salad. Between bites, Richard found himself asking more questions, not out of politeness but genuine interest. What do you hope to do after school? He asked. Amara twirled a piece of lettuce on her fork. I'd like to study occupational therapy or special education. I want to keep helping kids reach their potential. Maybe even open a bigger center someday. Richard couldn't help but admire her clarity of purpose. At her age, he had been obsessed with making money. Amara, by contrast, focused on making a difference. You're remarkable, he said quietly. She shrugged, smiling. I just believe small actions add up. A kind word, a little help, it all matters more than we think. Richard glanced at Ethan, who was laughing at a silly pun Amara had just made. Something stirred in his chest, a mix of gratitude and realization. In this simple cafe lunch, he was witnessing a lesson he hadn't expected, that compassion, not wealth, builds the strongest connections. For the first time in a long while, Richard felt lighter, as though the constant pressure of his business empire had eased. Across the table, Amara's presence glowed like a quiet reminder, real success is measured in kindness, not dollars. The lunch plates were cleared away, but Ethan and Amara were still laughing over a silly word game they'd invented with sugar packets. Their easy friendship filled the cafe with a kind of light Richard hadn't felt in years. He leaned back, watching them, a gentle warmth spreading through him. It struck Richard how natural it all seemed, no awkward pauses, no self-consciousness. Ethan, who usually kept his words short and his eyes on the floor, was now animated, his cheeks flushed from laughter. Amara listened intently to every joke, every half-finished thought, responding as though each word mattered. Richard's mind drifted to the past. He remembered nights when he'd tiptoe into Ethan's room after late meetings, only to find his son already asleep. He recalled missed school plays, postponed weekend outings, and the quiet disappointment in Ethan's eyes when yet another business trip took priority. Richard had convinced himself he was working for his family's future, that every late hour at the office was an act of love. But watching Ethan with Amara made that reasoning feel paper-thin. Amara gently guided Ethan's hand as they rearranged the sugar packets into a pattern. "You've got a great sense of design," she said. "These look like tiny skyscrapers." Ethan grinned. "Like Dad builds." Richard felt a pang. His towering buildings might dominate the skyline, but none of them had ever sparked the kind of pride he saw in his son's eyes right now. He realized, with sudden clarity, that he had been building the wrong kind of legacy. When Ethan struggled to move a packet with his weaker hand, Amara offered quiet encouragement. "Take your time. You've got this." She didn't rush him or take over, she simply stayed present, patient and calm. Richard was struck by how powerful that simple patience could be, how it allowed Ethan to succeed on his own terms. As the game wound down, Richard finally spoke. "Ethan," he said softly, "I love seeing you smile like this." Ethan looked up, surprised by the emotion in his father's voice. "It's fun, Dad. Amara makes it easy." Richard turned to Amara, gratitude welling in his chest. "You've given my son something I haven't managed in a long time." "Thank you." Amara shrugged lightly. "He just needed someone to listen. Sometimes that's all any of us need." Her words echoed in Richard's mind. Listen. A skill he used daily in negotiations, yet somehow forgot at home. For a long moment, Richard simply sat with the realization, money could buy equipment, tutors, even time-saving conveniences, but not connection, not joy. As they prepared to leave, Ethan clasped Amara's hand. "Will you come visit again?" Amara smiled. "I'd love to." Richard met her gaze and nodded, silently promising himself, and his son, that this was just the beginning of a new way of living, one where love and presence came before skyscrapers and spreadsheets. The afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows as they stepped outside, painting the sidewalk in soft gold. A cool breeze stirred the fallen leaves, and Richard felt lighter than he had in years. Ethan hummed a little tune Amara had taught him, his wheelchair rolling smoothly over the pavement. For a moment the three of them lingered, reluctant to end the day. Richard glanced at Amara and saw the same calm strength he'd noticed the moment he entered the cafe. Something told him that their meeting was no accident. "Amara," he said, pulling a sleek business card from his pocket, "I'd like to stay in touch. You've done something incredible for my son today." She looked startled. "Oh, you don't have to thank me. I was just happy to help." "This isn't about thanks," Richard replied gently. "You have a gift. I want to support whatever you dream of doing next, school, training, anything." Amara hesitated, her hand hovering over the card. I'm not sure I could accept that. I didn't help Ethan for a reward." Richard smiled, a rare softness in his usually commanding face. "That's exactly why you deserve it. You gave us your kindness with no strings attached." At last she accepted the card, tucking it carefully into her blazer pocket. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot." Over the following weeks, Richard kept his promise. He arranged a full scholarship for Amara to pursue a degree in occupational therapy, covering tuition, books, and living expenses. When she protested that it was too much, Richard simply said, "Consider it an investment in the good you'll bring to the world." But his generosity didn't stop there. Inspired by Amara's stories of the community center, Richard made a substantial donation to expand its programs, new equipment, additional staff, and a bright art studio for the children. He even volunteered time himself, something his old schedule would never have allowed. Board meetings were rearranged, evening calls were cut short. Most importantly, Richard began showing up for Ethan in ways that couldn't be measured in dollars. They played board games after dinner, explored parks on weekends, and shared quiet moments of conversation that once felt impossible. Ethan's laughter became a regular soundtrack in their home, not a rare melody. One crisp Friday evening, Richard and Ethan attended the community center's game night just as Amara had invited them. Richard watched his son race across the gym in a friendly wheelchair basketball match, determination and pure joy on his face. Amara cheered from the sidelines, clapping with the other volunteers. Richard felt a swell of gratitude. A single encounter in a small cafe, a stranger offering a bite of pastry, had transformed not only Amara's future but his own heart and his son's happiness. As the game ended and Ethan wheeled over, grinning from ear to ear, Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder and thought, "This is the real legacy I want to leave: love, presence, and the power of kindness." If this story warmed your heart, let kindness ripple, share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another inspiring tale like this one.